Welcome to the Stories Told podcast. This is episode 116, Wanting Something to Root For. This is the Stories Told podcast. Two authors talking about stories in movies, TV, and of course, books.
I'm Michael Grayford. I write action-adventure stories in fantasy and sci-fi worlds, sometimes for younger readers and sometimes for adults. And I try to always inject at least a little bit of humor.
And I am author E.W. Barnes, and I write action-adventure, time travel novels, and space opera science fiction. Thousands of years, thousands of worlds. But be forewarned, beyond here, there will be spoilers. Are you ready for the adventure? Let's begin. Welcome back to the Stories Told podcast. I'm author E.W. Barnes, and with me is author Michael Grayford. And today we're talking about the story told in the movie Fountain of Youth. How you doing today, Mike?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm doing well, thank you. What's new in your writing world?
New in writing world. Not too much. Been just kind of chilling and exploring the area. So weather's finally started to get good here, so done a bunch of hiking. That has been very distracting for writing. So
Yeah.
I haven't done too much other than just little things, businessy stuff, maintaining ads and things like that, checking on that kind of stuff. But actual writing, not really anything in the last week, unfortunately.
Yeah, but you know what? That kind of stuff is very brain cleansing and helps sort of refill the creative well. So I think there's a lot of value in that.
Yeah, I think so too.
I have also been doing a lot of marketing, but I'm also been focusing on Meridian, which is the third book in the Adventures of the Empyrean Guard, and cleaning some stuff up in that. So don't have any words under my belt, hoping to get some today. But yeah, just focusing on that particular story, and also focusing on my time travel series, because, once I finish, I have so many series in my head that I need to write. I do intend to get back into the time travel world after I've put out some of these science fiction stories that are demanding that I write them. I'm always kind of thinking a little bit about, okay, what do I want to do in that? And what do I want to do in that? And what do I want to do in that? So I would like to keep my hand in the time travel universe. So I've started developing a couple of YouTube shorts that are keeping my brain in the time travel world. And that's been kind of fun. So I've been doing that along with the focusing on this book. So that's what's going on for me. And what interesting stories have you found in books, movies, or television lately?
Not too much, just continuing to watch some shows that I've been watching that we discussed before. Other than that, yeah, nothing. Just reading a little bit of the book that we're going to discuss later this month. And yeah, that's it. That's super exciting. What about you?
Still reading the second book in the Stormlight Archive. I think it's Words of Radiance is the name of the book. Okay. And still watching an episode at a time of the Librarians show from 2014. So that's pretty much it, besides watching the movie that we are going to be talking about very shortly. Are you ready to talk about Fountain of Youth?
Yeah.
Today we're talking about the story told in the movie Fountain of Youth, which is on Apple TV, and I will read the summary that comes up when you type in Fountain of Youth on Google. Two estranged siblings partner on a global heist to find the mythological Fountain of Youth. They must use their knowledge of history to follow clues on an adventure that will change their lives and possibly lead to immortality. Did you like this movie?
Yeah, I'm fairly neutral on this movie. There are a number of things I liked about it. I think, there are amusing aspects to the storytelling, which I enjoy. I thought the opening sequence was fun and amusing, if not super original. I liked how they set up his character pretty quickly in the opening scenes. I thought you get a sense of who the person is, at least at a glance, to get you into the story. It didn't go too much into depth, but they start you off with action, so that's understandable. And then we are introduced to another party interested in this painting. Esme, I think is her name, who's not other person that he was running from, that Luke, the main character, was running from. So it opens up an interesting mystery there. Who's this person, this other party that's involved? So they do a good job of setting some things up early on in the story. I thought it was interesting how Luke is this art thief and his sister is a museum curator. I like that setup for potential conflict there, reminiscent of National Treasure. And one of the things I really liked was the riddle and puzzles. I have a lot of that in my Zara series. That stuff always resonates with me, and I'm always intrigued to see how they do that. I think those elements are cool. And I thought the sister has an interesting course of development over the story, from staunchly refusing to be involved, to being somewhat curious, to being ready to go. So I thought that was kind of cool. And I kind of like the goofy, flirty interplay between Luke and Esme, even though I'll have more to comment on that when we talk about what could be improved. And I like endings where the bad guy does himself in. See that a bunch in sort of Disney stories, which, they do that here. So I kind of like that. Yeah, but there's a number of things that I think could be improved. I like I said, I'm kind of neutral in this movie. I was engaged throughout. I had some fun watching it, but I think there's a lot that could be improved. What about you? Let's start with what you liked about it.
And let's talk about what you kind of touched on, which is that this movie has a lot of connective, let's call it homages, to National Treasure, to Indiana Jones, both the Lost Ark and The Last Crusade. Also, a little bit of Raise the Titanic by Clive Cussler was in there when they pulled up the Lusitania, which I have to say was my favorite part of this movie. I thought that was really creative to figure out a way to find the Lusitania, to slice off a part of the ship that they needed and raise it to the surface so they can find what they needed to find. And like you, I also really like clues and cleverness in finding your way on a treasure hunt, essentially. And so I enjoyed those things too. I thought the reference to the Wicked Bible was really interesting.
Yeah.
I appreciated most, you talked about the interplay between Luke and Esme, which I too also thought was fun. I liked Thomas, the kid, the most as a character. I thought he was really interesting. I wanted to learn more about him. And anytime you stick Stanley Tucci in a movie, I love that. So I was really excited to see Stanley Tucci. So yeah, it certainly was all over the place as far as we went to different parts of the world. It was fun to kind of go all over the place and all these different locations and end up in Egypt. And of course, Egypt is a wonderful place that these stories can tap into because there's so much mystery in Egypt and there's so much depth of history that it makes it easy to kind of go in there and be a little creative about what's going to happen in the story. Such as at the end of the story, there is this use of sound in order to enable our adventurers to get further into the mystery that I thought was very creative. I like that too. There was some elements to this that I did enjoy. Yes.
Yeah, I like those things as well. One of the things I like about puzzles and riddles and things like that is we get to see the characters being smart and clever, like you said, which is something I appreciate in protagonists. Well, I like that in antagonists too. I like when there's a back and forth where both sides are working together and they're both smart and they're both, they challenge each other, right? In addition to, the challenges they're facing from the riddle or puzzle or whatever. So I like that kind of storytelling. And I think you're right with having it in Egypt. It kind of makes sense in the way that they set up the story too, with the idea that there's this, sort of folklore, this fountain of youth idea that's been out there in different places in the world. It kind of makes sense that if that was the case, it would have originated from an ancient civilization like in Egypt or something like that. Otherwise, if it was in America, how would anyone else have stories about that? It wouldn't make sense. So that kind of tied together well, I thought. And also my second book is in Egypt, so I kind of like that.
So let's talk about what we might have changed as a writer.
On a high level, I won't speak high level yet. One of the things is I wanted more from the main character. Like, Why was he so motivated to find this Fountain of Youth? There's reference to continuing his father's legacy or something like that. Kind of very vague and hand wavy. Like, what drives this character? Is there some emotional wound from his past that he's compensating for, that he wants to fill? I just wanted more from there. Like, his character felt like National Treasure light, and I wanted more depth from him. Along that lines, I would have tried to build up more of the romantic tension between Luke and Esme. He was clearly flirting with her, but it didn't feel believably reciprocated at all. It just felt like, I don't know, like he was trying too hard and versus letting it flow naturally. Like it was written not as smoothly as it could have been. And it felt like the main character thought he was being charming, but was oblivious to the fact that it wasn't working. Which, if that's what they were going for, I felt like they could have amped that up to get more humor out of it. It didn't seem like they were going for that. It seemed like they were trying to tell us that these two are flirting with each other and there's this tension building, and I didn't see that. Maybe that was just me, but it didn't feel like that was working at all for me. So I would have either made that more the case, have her flirt back and have some romantic tension, some moments where they're close, or have her just be shutting it down and him be oblivious and, you know, making fun of that. One of those two ways I would have gone. The villain, I feel like since the villain of the story we learn actually wasn't dying, I'm not sure I believe his motivation to spend so much money and so much time on what really he should have just dismissed as a folklore story. Like, there just wasn't any, when you take away the fact that he's dying, his motivation becomes unbelievable to me. I think they could have just left him, like still had him dying and still be a total jerk. Those two things are not at odds with each other. And at least it would have made sense then why he was still going for this. It's like, hey, I'm dying anyway. I've got all this money. Let me try for it. Versus, I'm just going to go after this mythological thing in this world that I have no reason to believe is actually real. It didn't make sense. I think that would have been an easy fix to at least keep his motivation believable. A lot of the dialogue didn't feel very natural to me. I'm not sure. I mean, I don't know how to specifically say, oh, you can fix it by doing this, other than making a couple more passes with different readers and, you know, getting feedback on what works and what doesn't. But it felt very stiff. Maybe that's the way it was delivered with the editing or something. I'm not sure. Just some of the lines weren't as smooth as they could have been, I think. I mean, there's this secret order, right, that Esme is part of, working to keep the Fountain of Youth from being under anyone's control. It's kind of an interesting idea, but at the same time, it feels like it's just a straight up copy from Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, and even The Mummy. It's like had the same exact setup. Yeah, I don't know. And I don't know how much that added to the story, really. Overall, the story felt like a blend of Indy 3 and National Treasure with not much else. I mean, it felt like just a copy of these movies, right? They just kind of smushed them together. I wanted something more unique. And Guy Ritchie typically has a very good style to his movies, and I didn't see that come through here. I don't know, throw some ninjas in there or something. Just give me something else to work with. Anyway, those are my thoughts. What did you have? What did you see that could be improved, and how would you improve it?
You sort of tagged on all the things that I noted. And one of the most important was when you were saying that you just didn't understand why the main character, Luke, wanted to do this. We never actually were really told what is his need, because that's what makes a good story arc. We understand what the character's need is, and then at the end we see how that need may or may not have been met, or shifted or changed, because sometimes you get the need met and then you realize that's not your need, and that's the arc. And we don't know what his need is. We're never told what his need is, to my knowledge, unless I missed it, but I don't recall seeing it. And so that kind of made it very sort of like, why is he doing this? And it also made it difficult to sort of like him, if that makes any sense.
No,
what I saw, without understanding his need, I saw someone racing through cities, endangering people's lives for things he's stolen.
Yes.
And being interested in stealing more. Not a likable character.
No.
We see him like looking at the Vanderbilt's jewels, right? As they're trying to just get the Rembrandt from the Lusitania, and he's like tempted by the jewels. not a likable character. So without that set out need, I'm kind of going, why am I rooting for this guy? And similarly, her needs, his sister's needs, felt very superimposed and inconsistent.
Yeah.
I need to keep my job. I need to protect my child, but I'm going to go ahead and go with you into a pyramid in Egypt where I know things could be dangerous and which the bad guy turns out to be bad, but I'm still taking my child in. It just, there's all this inconsistency for a need, like I need to keep my job and not lose my kid in a custody battle. But I don't know, it seemed like taking your kid into a pyramid with a bad guy and a whole bunch of guns is not real conducive to a custody battle. So it's just sort of strange what her needs were too. What we got was Luke's interpretation of what her need was. You need to go on adventures. You need to get out and do stuff. And even her son Thomas said the same thing. You're boring. You need to go on adventures. But we didn't hear that from her.
Yeah, we never saw her yearning for that.
Right. So we just saw this sort of waffly behavior from her. So that was very frustrating too. And then add on top of that, she has characteristics that are not really great, such as, oh, I'm frustrated, so I'm going to drink 3 bottles of champagne. It could have been a quirky character element, but instead it was just sort of like, it was all we had to fill in the gap of why is she doing this? And that's not a good way to fill in the gap. I think you also hit on it when you said there was a lot of telling. They told us there was flirtation instead of showing us. And I think that was probably the biggest problem for me in this movie that I would love to have cleaned up, was taking out all the telling and doing some more showing. We spent so much time listening to exposition that still didn't give us what we needed.
That's true. Yeah, that's a good point.
So that's what I would have cleaned it up. And I think your suggestion of, having a couple of more reviews of this draft of this screenplay might have been helpful, because I think the whole concept of it could have worked. Like you said, give us something new. I don't know about you, but I knew pretty much from moment one that Esme was good and Owen Carver was bad, because everything in this show was giving us so much cliched storytelling that there were no surprises at the end. Yeah, he's a bad guy. Yeah, she's a good guy. I would have liked to have been a little bit more surprised, turn things on their head. I'm not sure how I would have done that. Maybe make those revelations be a little bit more surprising. Like, keep us guessing until almost the very end would have been nice.
Yeah.
With Owen Carver being the bad guy, he leaves the restaurant where he's just fed an underage kid alcohol. And he sees guys who are like going to tell him to get in a car, and he knows that they're threatening him. And so then he does some ninja moves and disables the guys. Well, okay, I guess that means that he's a bad guy. And maybe not as sick as we thought he was.
Yeah.
Maybe taking that kind of stuff out, where he keeps to his persona of being, I'm sick and I'm doing this to save my life and I'm generous with my money, etc. Just keep that going until like the very last minute would have been cool. And keeping Esme threatening, and I'm going to take you out if you continue this, and not even telling us that she's the protector, making it seem like she's just interested in the power of it too, until the very, very last minute. Like, if you had her and Owen switch roles at the same time, that would have been kind of cool.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Yeah, no, I agree. I think it needed something like that, because you're right. It was just all very predictable.
Yeah.
And a bit by the numbers, maybe. I think some tweaks would have added some more intrigue, some more surprise. And I think you're right with motivation. I think that's a big problem I had, is the character motivations, and really cementing those and having those motivations define as characters, I think would have helped a lot. Because I had that problem with the villain, with Luke, with the sister. Looking at it now, I'm like thinking about it, all of them. You're right. It's like, what are they doing?
Esme's the only one with clear motivation.
Right.
Okay, well, let's talk theme. Were you able to pull any themes from this, except, for the theme that kept being repeated at us?
I think that is the theme, right? I think what I came up with, trying to put it in a sentence, was something like, one who succumbs to a selfish lust for power will be undone by it.
Oh, that's a good one.
Something like that, right? Because we see that difference ultimately in the climax between Luke, the quote hero, and Owen, the villain, right? Once it comes to it and one doesn't. So that's what I got.
Good. That's
What
a
about
good
you?
one. And of course, I pulled the one that kept being repeated over and over and over again. It's the journey, not the prize, which it would have been great if that had been, that could have been the need at the very beginning, said a couple of times, and then at the end. And then that would have put a nice little bow on it. And I think it would have given it a lot more cohesion.
Yeah, and I think
Yeah.
if they had gone for that theme, you could have represented that with the sister. I forget her name. Who did Natalie Portman play? What character?
Charlotte Purdue. Oh,
Charlotte. Yeah,
the secret lies
they
with Charlotte.
could have had that theme represented through her. Have the main character Luke be more steadfast. More. This is what I want to do, and this is a life that you've lost, and let me reintroduce you to it, and then have her come around to that. Like, I liked that transition in her, but it wasn't.
It didn't feel earned.
It didn't feel earned, and we didn't see her wanting that. If we'd seen her kind of struggling with her life as it was, like kind of bored doing this work, getting excited when she learns that, oh, maybe one of these art pieces is fake or something was stolen, she see her eyes light up, something like that. Then see her transition to the end and have the end be more like they get there and they're like, okay, we're here, whatever. They're not that impressed by it because they just had fun being together and going on this adventure. That could have worked.
One way they could have done it is the scene at the very beginning where her husband's sitting with his attorney, getting, preparing for the divorce. And he could have said something like, when we met, you went on adventures and everything was really exciting with you. And now all you do is go to work at the museum and come home and, we're not having fun anymore. Something along those lines to show that something's changed in her. And that's what's put her in her circumstances right now. Then that need we would have been able to infer that need right there. She wouldn't have had to say it. We would have just inferred it. She needs to go back out and have adventures.
Yeah.
So let's talk about what we take away from the movie Fountain of Youth as writers.
I think for me, let me try to think of one thing. I guess the thing that stands out for me is it's okay to be inspired by previous works. All storytellers are. You can't not be. But be sure to make your work its own thing, not just, sort of a copy or an imitation of something previous, which is a bit what this felt like. I mean, I don't want to bash it too much, but I'd say I enjoyed it. I enjoyed watching it, but I think it could have been so much better if it had done more to be its own thing.
Good. And for me, I focused on the needs of the characters. I think it's really important. You don't have to be all exposition-y with need, but demonstrate the need.
Yes.
Why is everybody doing what they're doing? And then the reader, the viewer, will go a long way in a story if they understand what the need is. Even if there's a lot of showing and not telling, giving that to the reader and giving them a place, or the watcher, a place to sort of sink their teeth in and say, okay, I get what this person's looking for. Are they going to be able to do it? And how are they going to be able to do it? I think that's just so huge.
Yeah, give us a reason to root for that character.
Yes. Thank you for joining us as we talked about the story told in Fountain of Youth. A huge thanks to our Patreon supporters and all our listeners. Your support noticed through every like and every share means the world to us. If you enjoyed today's themes, here are some further readings. Michael's Tales of Zara series was inspired by the Arabian mythology of 1001 Nights. You start with the Golden Scarab of Balahar, an enchanting quest that will captivate readers who love magic, wonder, and strong heroines in a story told with plenty of heart and a generous dash of humor. All those links are in the show notes if you're curious to explore more. The Stories Told podcast is on all major platforms. Please like, subscribe, or follow to help us reach more story lovers like you. For book, TV, or movie suggestions, drop a note on our YouTube channel, and that link is also in the show notes. You can find Michael Grayford at michaelgrayford.com and E.W. Barnes at 1000years.com. Join us next time as we talk about the story told in one of our favorite original series Star Trek episodes, The Tholian Web. Thanks so much, Mike. This was a lot of fun.
Yeah, thank you.
And we'll see you next time on the Stories Told podcast.